Hi, this is the Big Hardcore Gamer, and in this video I'll be giving you my review for the Callisto Protocol. I won't be showing any jump scares because you really need to experience those for yourself. But I will be showing combat with some of the different enemies, including one of the bosses which was actually shown in the trailer. Now, this is necessary to demonstrate some of the points I'll be talking about. Right, let's get into it. Now, I want to start off by saying that I actually liked the Callisto Protocol. I've been hyped for the game since the very first gameplay trailer, which was shown at the State of Play during the Summer Game Fest. I pre-ordered the game as soon as it became available and got the game day one. I've been posting my clips and photos from the coolest parts of the game on Twitter, and I've been having a blast. But I can't deny that this game has some major flaws, which, if it's going to continue as a franchise, and I actually believe it should, we definitely do deserve sequels for this game, these issues need to be addressed before the sequels. So, the Callisto Protocol is a third-person survival horror game directed by Glenn Schofield, who previously co-directed the Dead Space series. You play as Jacob, who's a pilot transporting cargo between planets. After some events that take place at the start of the game, Jacob crash lands on Callisto. While he thinks he's about to be rescued, he ends up being taken to the planet's prison, Black Iron Prison, by orders of the warden. Not long after arriving, all hell breaks loose, and he has to fight his way through inmates and guards who have been infected by a mysterious disease, which, while trying to escape the prison and also uncover the mystery of how the outbreak occurred. Now, let's start off by addressing the elephant in the room. Okay, this game has similarities to Dead Space. This was blatantly obvious from the trailers, and even more so when you play it. So I'm going to talk about that first. They have made changes to certain things to basically make their own version specific to this game. For example, in Dead Space, you add the suit with the health monitor on its back. In Callisto, Jacob has a device implanted in the back of his neck when taken to Black Iron Prison, which displays the health levels for the character, ranging from green for good, elf, amber for mid, and red for you're about to die if you get so much as a scratch. But it's also used for storing Callisto credits, which is the game's currency. The implants on NPCs, well, on dead NPCs, is also used for area access. So remember how in Dead Space and in most other games, you'll need to go and search for access key to get through certain areas. Well, in this game, you actually need to cut the implant out of the back of, out of an NPC's neck to be able to progress through certain areas. Another thing similar to Dead Space is the telekinesis ability, which in this game is called GRB, which I just ended up calling grab because that's basically what you're doing. You're like grabbing things from a distance. This is basically a glove you find, allowing you to grab enemies from a distance and also throw them. I was actually disappointed with how this worked in the game because it's like a weaker version of what we had in Dead Space. It can be upgraded, and I'll get to that later. But what I was actually disappointed with is that you can't grab literally everything with it, which I'm sure you could do in Dead Space. Now, because the enemies are different in this game, and you can't use telekinesis to shoot their limbs back at them and impale them, what you can do was always going to be different in this game. But if I remember correctly, you could literally grab anything that wasn't bolted down and throw it. This included dead bodies, which is one of the first things I tried to do when I got the ability in this game. In Callisto, you can only grab enemies when they're alive, but once you kill them, they can't be grabbed. This also goes for most items as well, but you can grab exploding canisters, which definitely comes in handy, as well as other items like buckets. Basically, the reason why I try to do this is because in this game, like most survival horror games, you want to try and reserve your ammo any way you can. So being able to grab and throw items as weapons is something I wanted to be able to do. Also, you'll still need to stomp on enemies you've killed for them to drop loot, just like in Dead Space. Those are really the main similarities to Dead Space. So it's not just a copy and paste job, which some people will lead you to believe. One of the things that really separates Callisto Protocol from Dead Space is, love it or hate it, the melee combat. Because this game really wants you to get up in their face, which is different from every other survival horror game that lets you keep your distance. Before you even get your first gun, you have to make do with a metal bar and then eventually your stun baton, which I loved. Now, I love the melee and dodge mechanics when it worked, but not so much when it doesn't work. It's basically the dodge mechanic from The Last of Us 2, but rather than map it to a button, they went for the strange decision to assign it to the left analog stick. It's a learning curve, and I would have preferred it to be mapped to a button, but after the first hour or so, it's not a big deal once you get the hang of it. You basically move the stick to the left or to the right to dodge an attack, and then move to the opposite direction when they make a second attack. And then you counter and beat the crap out of them with your baton. When you get your guns, you'll see an indicator appear on them after you've beaten the crap out of them, with a little target to shoot to cause the most damage. I thought this was actually pretty cool, and once I got the hang of it, I was having fun destroying enemies with the melee and shooting combo. It's when you have to deal with groups of enemies that it can, that's when it became an issue. Though, so I would also combine it with the grab. I'd pull an enemy from the group, beat him with the baton, shoot him, beat him some more, and just keep doing it until he was dead, and then work on the next one. But like I said, once I got used to it, I liked it, when it worked. There were many occasions where it just didn't work though. I would be moving the stick to the left or right, and Jacob just wouldn't dodge. Also, the block function is mapped to the same stick. You pull down on the stick to block rather than just push a button. The dodging I can deal with, but I want to know what kind of crack they were smoking to think it was a good idea to do this for the block. When enemies are trying to melee you, it's easier to just dodge them. But some of the enemies will shoot projectiles at you that need to be blocked. And if you're not quick enough, you'll take damage. For your weapons, you have variations of handguns, shotguns, and an assault rifle. I actually think I may have missed a weapon, as I'm sure there was space on my inventory for an additional one. In this game, you find blueprints, and you'll take them to a buy station for it to 3D print the weapon for you. I actually thought the animation for this was a nice, cool touch, as you actually see the weapon being printed. You can also buy upgrades for every weapon you have, as well as for the GRB, and buy ammo and health from the buy station, which is also 3D printed. The heavy attack for the baton was one of the first upgrades I bought, and the most useful. I would pull an enemy in with the grab, and then heavy strike them into conveniently placed spikes on the wall. For the weapons, they've kind of done their take off the one weapon but many attachment system from Control. It's basically a gun handle as the base, and you'll slot on different attachments to change it from, say, a handgun into a shotgun or whatever. This is cool at first, but becomes a bit of a problem later on in the game when dealing with lots of enemies. But I'll talk about these problems later. The guns actually do feel powerful, and I can say this because I played on PS5, so as well as seeing the damage caused to my enemies on screen, I could actually feel it through the DualSense controller with the adaptive triggers. Ammo isn't an issue early on in the game. I was actually surprised about this and commented about this on the footage I captured, because I played on maximum security difficulty, so I really wasn't expecting the game to just constantly throw ammo at me. But then you'll get to a point where you will go through your ammo very quickly, and then the anxiety kicks in. This is when it goes back to the standard limited ammo, that you find in most horror games. When this happens, you're really going to need to use your dodge and melee skills, so it's best to practice from early. Another thing, and you can take this as either positive or negative depending on the type of player you are. Apart from some issues later in the game isn't that difficult. Well, it's not as difficult as Dead Space. When I played Dead Space back in 2009, I tried it on the hard difficulty. I don't even mean on the hardest difficulty. I just mean tried it on hard, right? I lasted 1 or 2 hours before I decided that life was too short, and I switched it back to normal. Because the necromorphs were kicking my ass. They were on a complete madness in that game. Even after switching to normal, I still ended up rage quitting and putting the game down for a couple months. Maximum security is the hardest difficulty on the Callisto Protocol that's currently available, and I was able to beat it over a weekend. I think this was probably because I had other methods to kill these creatures, and when you get good at it and it actually works, you can get through them easier than on Dead Space. There is a difficulty spike, which I'll talk about later, but if you're comparing this to Dead Space, this is the light version when it comes to difficulty. Also, and this is something that I was shocked about, the game's not scary. Dead Space had me shook for a week after I finally beat it. But with this game, I didn't have as much of a problem. And I'm someone that scares easily. Saying that though, I may just be desensitized because I've played a lot of hardcore shit over the years. Or it could just be, because the amount of options they give you to deal with the enemies in this game. For example, the scariest thing I've seen in a horror game recently was the dollhouse in Resident Evil Village. And that was because they take all your weapons away and you just have to deal with, you have to deal with that thing. And Callisto is pretty much the opposite of that. But there are some really good jump scares in this game that definitely got me on many occasions. Also, the atmosphere is in some areas definitely freaked me out. Some corridors are dark with steam and just the right amount of light. You'll have areas with pods growing on the floor and walls. That definitely was inspired by the Aliens franchise. And the audio mixed with the haptics on the DualSense is a great combination. You'll hear those monsters making noise close by, the music will intensify, and you'll hear them opening up a crawl space in another room. Then you won't just hear them moving through the vents, right? You'll actually feel them moving through the haptics on the controller. I was very impressed with this, and trust me when I say that this saved my ass a few times. The game really does use the DualSense features to the max, and you'll notice it from the moment you're going through the start menu and you feel the vibrations from every option selected on the controller. When moving through cracks in the walls and basically interacting with anything, you will feel the haptics. They've actually implemented the DualSense better than some of Sony's first-party studios, which I was really surprised to see. Now, talking about the audio again, my headset was connected to my PC because I was capturing footage, on my PC. So I don't think I got the full benefit of the 3D audio. And the audio was still amazing. I could still tell where some enemies were from the sounds that they were making, and I could figure out, when I'm about to be jumped. The developers do like you to worry about what's around the corner though. So they will sometimes start to intensify the music when nothing's actually there, just to mess with your head. And then you'll be walking through an area that's quiet and a monster will just smash through a window or a vent and attack you. The graphics and overall presentation is one of the best things about this game. I'm not sure if you can really tell from this video because of the YouTube compression and it being in 1080p, but this is a stunning game. The best looking games I've played this year are Horizon Forbidden West, A Plague Tale Requiem, and now the Callisto Protocol. The game actually does look like a movie in most parts, and the character models for the cast are amazing, especially the character model for Jacob. I don't usually play games at 30 FPS because I will always choose frame rate over resolution, but I played the majority of this game in quality mode just so that I could see it running with ray tracing. At first, this was by accident because for some reason you can't change graphics modes while you're actually playing the game. You have to exit out to the game menu and then select it. So at the start of the game, I was playing on quality mode, and I was actually struggling at first with the 30 FPS because the entire first level is intentionally slow. When you actually get into the prison and are moving around, the 30 FPS doesn't actually feel too jarring. I did change it to performance mode when playing early in the morning, just because my eyes were struggling to adjust. You know, when waking up at like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, eyes were struggling a bit to adjust. And obviously, it ran smooth at 60 FPS and still looked amazing. But I went back to quality mode because this game looks just that damn good. Also, because this is a slower paced game, the 30 FPS, is less of an issue. Now, striking distance added a few other little touches to get you fully immersed into the game. There's no heads-up display, which I'm sure is the same in Dead Space. The ammo levels are displayed on the guns. When moving through crawl spaces, you'll actually see Jacob's body contort while going around the corner. You never know what's around the corner when doing this, and it's basically a jump scare waiting to happen. Another nice touch is that Jacob will actually look back over his shoulder when walking through corridors, as if he heard something that's, made him paranoid. I was impressed with little touches like this. The voice acting is really good as well. Elias is one of my favorites because as a Brit myself, his British accent and dialogue was actually making me laugh. And also Sam Witwer as the cold-blooded prison guard adds some pretty cool moments. But my criticism with him was he wasn't in the game enough. The death animations are fun to watch and are extremely gory. Some of them really did make me laugh when they happened to me. The issue I found though was that you'll get to a certain point of the game where you've seen all of them. And because I died a lot in this game, I just ended up, restarting the checkpoint to get through them quickly because there's no skip button. Now, the next point we'll talk about, and this is one of the negatives, is the checkpoint system in the game. Now, I know in Dead Space, you would have to manually go to a to a save station to save the game. But in this game, it has a checkpoint system that doesn't always save after you complete some of the tough battles. And this was one of the few issues I had early on in the game rather than later. Now, there's one enemy in particular, and this is when I actually found out about this, that I struggled to get past because the only method to defeat it was to shoot a particular point, and I was low on ammo. When I finally beat it and I got the trophy for it, I expected the game to autosave straight after, but because it's kind of like a mini boss that you have to defeat, it did not autosave. An enemy popped up and attacked me right afterwards, and I had no ammo. And to make things worse, I couldn't kill this enemy with melee combat because it just kept coming back for more and then killed me. This resulted in me being put back to the previous checkpoint, right before I took on that mini boss and having to struggle all over again. And although you have the option to manually save from the menu, it doesn't work, and it's just a waste of time. I mean, I tried manually saving the game, and it would just end up putting me back to the previous checkpoint. For enemy variety, there's actually not that many. Now, they use a little trick that I didn't actually think about until I completed the game, where enemies you faced earlier on are made stronger when they start to mutate. Basically, at a point in the game, and this isn't a spoiler because it was discussed before the game released, tentacles will start growing out of the enemy, indicating that they're about to mutate. And you have to shoot the tentacles before this can happen. If you don't, they're mutated into an hardcore bullet sponge that's extremely hard to kill. Also, some of the enemies in the game reminded me of enemies from other horror games. There's a creature that reminded me of, I forgot what they call it, I think they're called lickers from Resident Evil. But the one that really stood out was the blind monster. These are basically clickers from The Last of Us. You can deal with them, head on if you like problems in your life, or you can sneak up on them and stealth kill them with your shank. Just like, you guessed it, clickers in The Last of Us. Also, they moved in formation, which I found really funny, because it's like they're marching. That being said, though, it was very tense moving through their areas while trying not to make a sound. These sections were where I felt the most uncomfortable when playing the game. My biggest issue with the enemy variety, though, comes down to one enemy in particular, that two-headed bastard. And again, this enemy was in the trailer. To be honest, most of the enemies were in the trailer, but I hated this one the most. And it's a boss fight that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. So if you don't want to see footage of this fight, just close your eyes or skip a couple minutes. This boss fight is very basic. When you figure it out, you just dodge its attacks, shoot, dodge some more, shoot, dodge some more, shoot, and then melee at the right time. Okay, I died quite a few times after, until I figured this out, because for some reason, when you melee, the heavy attack doesn't do any damage. So I'm there literally just beating the crap out of him with the heavy attack, and he just keeps coming back for more. But the light attacks does, massive damage. And then when I figured this out, I was still getting killed because the dodge wasn't working. After finally beating him, I thought that that would be the last I see of him. Nah, he appeared 3 or 4 more times, and each time he was more of a pain in the ass. On the last encounter, I was so pissed off that I almost reduced the difficulty to medium just to get past this fight, because by then I'd had enough. Now, let's talk about the game's biggest issue. And it's not actually the dodge and melee combat, that most people are saying. The game's biggest issue is with 2 things. It's with movement speed and weapon changes. Okay? These things got me killed more than anything else in the game. They intentionally make your movement slow, preventing you from being able to quickly get away from the enemies. Now, obviously, this was done by design, and I think it's it's them trying to simulate our nightmares. The ones where you're being chased, but you're not able to run away fast enough like you would in real life. Basically, it feels like that's what they're trying to simulate. So I understand why it's in the game, but it takes away from the fun of the game. So I'm hoping that this is removed from the sequel. As for the weapon changes, I mentioned early on that the method for changing weapons is cool at first, but it's a problem later on. Well, let me explain. There is a quick swap between light and heavy weapons, which you're not told about until you've been struggling for a while. but the issue is when changing between different types of weapons. For example, say I've run out of ammo for my hand cannon, but I have a good amount of ammo for another gun. I have to open up the weapon wheel by pressing right on the D-pad, and then use the up and down to cycle through the weapon types. Oh, and by the way, when you get to the first or last weapon type in the wheel, it doesn't go back to the start or end of the list. You have to go back up or down manually. Then you select the weapon that you want with the X button. Then Jacob goes through the animation of removing the attachment for one gun and slotting on the attachment for another. If the gun was empty when you last used it, you then have to add a few more seconds on to reload the weapon. Does this sound long to you? Great, because it gets worse. If you break the animation in any way for switching weapons, it stops the weapon change. So if you accidentally press the left trigger when changing weapons, it breaks animation. Or if you do something critical to the game, like, I don't know, dodging an attack from the two-headed bastard during the animation, it will also break the animation. The whole weapon change system is broken and is the biggest issue I had with the game. And the thing is, just like most of the other issues in the game, they don't start to reveal themselves, they don't start to reveal how bad they are until late in the game. For the first half or more of the game, I actually couldn't see what the big issue was with the game, that lowered the score. And then when dealing with the last few levels, all the issues hit you with a vengeance. And by the time I faced the two-headed bastard for the final time, I just couldn't wait for the game to end. In this game, when you die, it's often because the controls and the game mechanics are not working as they should. So now it's time for the verdict. Like I said at the beginning of the game, I actually did think that this was a good game. Even though the story is pretty basic, it's still interesting enough for me to be curious about what happens next. So I will be buying the story DLC and the sequel when available. The overall presentation of the game is amazing, whether it be the graphics, sound design, the way the DualSense features were implemented, and the overall immersion. Even though this is a cross-gen game, it definitely doesn't look like it, and is one of the most stunning games I've played this year. When things do work, it's great, but when the controls fail you, it sucks the fun out of the game. They need to fix the reload system and make your actions quicker. I'm not sure if this can be done as a patch before the free DLC arrives in February, or if it just needs to be ready for the sequel, but it definitely needs some work. In fact, they should just go back to the drawing board for the controls in general before the sequels are released. With all this being said, I'm giving Callisto Protocol a 7 out of 10. It actually was, an 8.5 out of 10 in my eyes before I got to the last few levels and had to battle the controls as well as the enemies in the game. But, when that happened, the score dropped. I still think you should check it out, but at the right price. I've seen a lot of Americans saying that this game costs $70, which confused me because over there in the UK, it was £55 on PSN. And when games are released for $70 in the US, it's usually £70 here in the UK. If you go for the physical edition, you can actually get it cheaper, because that's actually what I did. I paid around £44 for my copy, and this is actually a reasonable price to pay for this game. Now, I hope you found this review useful. I did record my entire playthrough, so I will be working on a Let's Play series from the footage. So if you want to see me go through the highs and lows of this game and hear me going into rage mode at some of the most frustrating sections, you should definitely consider subscribing to my channel. Also, please hit the like button, as this video took a lot of time to make, and follow me on Twitter at Bigg. Now, I'm often posting clips from my PS5 directly to Twitter. even for games where I don't make YouTube videos. So you know, it's worth following me on there. Okay, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.